Hello, good afternoon, and for some of you, a very good morning. I hope you're joining us after a good lunch or breakfast and you have your coffees in front of you and you're ready for some very enlightening discussions about the increasingly complex intersection between the humanitarian field and the world of new and emerging digital technologies. I am Clara, the head of communications at the International Committee of the Red Cross Kuala Lumpur Regional Delegation, and I will be your MC for this program. First of all, on behalf of the organizers, the ICRC and the Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore, we would like to welcome all facilitators, speakers, and participants to the RSIS ICRC Data Governance and Protection in Humanitarian Action Workshop 2021. It's wonderful to have all of you here, and we're really excited to get started. A little bit of background about this event. As you know, in 2017, the ICRC and the Brussels Privacy Hub published the Handbook on Data Protection in Humanitarian Action. Now, the handbook basically provides guidance for the humanitarian sector on the application of data protection principles in humanitarian work. Given, of course, the evolving digital environment and the emergence of new needs, an updated version was launched last year, exploring several new topics that have gained particular prominence in recent years. Following discussions with RSIS on the handbook, its launch, the new topics, we decided to have this workshop to bring together different stakeholders from humanitarian organizations, academia, tech companies, civil society, and so on, and data protection authorities to discuss some of the topics explored in the handbook. For example, digital identities, AI, machine learning. Basically, we want to facilitate the platform for future cooperation. Now, before I open the floor for opening remarks, just a few reminders and ground rules. The event is held under the Chatham House rule. So participants are free to use the information received, but neither the identity nor the affiliation of the speakers nor that of any other participant may be revealed. Also, just to note that only the plenary will be recorded, but not the breakout sessions later. We ask all participants also to avoid denunciation and sharing of sensitive information during the course of the program. And the breakout sessions will run concurrently. So after the plenary, you will automatically be taken to your respective breakout rooms. If there are issues, please contact Joey from RSIS. You will see her name here. And you can use the chat function for that to send a message directly to her also. Before the end of the breakouts, there will be a reminder and everybody will be brought back to the main group. On questions and comments, we might have time for one or two during the plenary. And if so, you may use the chat box for this purpose. If not, we encourage everybody to be as interactive as possible during the breakout sessions. And you can also post your questions during the summary of discussions after the breakouts. Right, with that done, let's get right into it. I would like now to invite Ms. Biljana Milosevic, the head of the ICRC Kuala Lumpur Regional Delegation, to say a few words. Over to you, Biljana.
Thank you very much, Clara, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you all for joining us today, and our special thanks to our co-organizers, Rajaratnam School of International Studies, for their continued support on this vital topic. Today, we live in an ever-changing era where digital transformation has touched the lives of not just urban dwellers like you and me, but it has also deeply impacted the lives of millions who live in humanitarian emergencies and in situations of armed conflict around the world. The use of these technologies has, however, also highlighted the important dimension of protecting personal data, which is an integral part of protecting the life, integrity, and dignity of individuals. As it has been said, data are not just data, data are people. The ICRC has consistently highlighted the importance of this. Last year, the ICRC launched the second edition of the Handbook on Data Protection in Humanitarian Action, a key guidance in helping humanitarian practitioners navigating the difficult meadows of digitalization and evolving technologies. Since then, we have launched a broader initiative, the Digitarium, a global digital forum to discuss and debate the digital transformation within the humanitarian sector, to bring together and encourage dialogue and exchange among different stakeholders. Today represents a continuation of our efforts in this space. We are delighted to have so many of you here today from different backgrounds and experiences, humanitarian, government, academia, civil society, among others. Together with the RSIS, what we have carefully done today is to select 3 topics from the handbook for discussion in the breakout group. We hope that with the discussions, we will substantiate our understanding of the benefits of the use of new technologies in various humanitarian operations, but also equally identify the potential concerns which these technologies often raise. Importantly, I hope that we will also be able to build on our understanding of the safeguards and potentially best practices to enable humanitarian organizations and our beneficiaries to leverage the benefits of new technologies in the best possible way. I wish you a productive discussion this afternoon, and I hope that this will be a continuing conversation with you as we plan more engagements in future in this space with your support. Thank you very much and enjoy the session. Back to you, Clara.
Thank you very much, Biljana, for that. And indeed, we do hope that this event will allow us to continue discussions on this important topic. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Melly Caballero Anthony, Head of the Center for Non-Traditional Security Studies at the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, to deliver her welcome remarks. Thank you. Over to you, Prof. Melly.
Thank you, Clara. And good afternoon and good morning to, good evening to all of us, all of you have joined this workshop on behalf of the Rajaratnam School of International Studies and the Center for Non-Traditional Security. We are delighted to be co-organizing this workshop on data governance protection in humanitarian action. The importance of digital technology in the work of the humanitarian world has been mooted as an excellent way of optimizing the kinds of activities that the humanitarian world actually undertake. Yet we are all aware of the different challenges, whether it's legal, it's ethical or technical challenges that confront this particular means. A large part of the conversation on data protection really revolves around governance, and the protection of the individual's personal data has become a very integral part of protecting their life, their integrity, and their dignity. I join my colleagues in the center in appreciating the kind of areas or themes that this workshop intended to discuss on digital identities, the implications for usage in humanitarian situations, that looks at examines the risk associated with the use of digital identities, especially involving vulnerable populations. The theme on artificial intelligence and machine learning, looking at the practical and ethical challenges, given the fact that most of the challenges relate to the much debated topic of automated decision-making, while others arise from the fact that such systems frequently rely on heavy usage of data, sometimes including personal data. There's also the theme of information sharing, looking at platforms that are available in the region and which stakeholders do they engage with. There's therefore the need, as far as this sharing is concerned, to examine how the humanitarian community can work together to develop sufficient governance mechanism to, among others, improve data sharing where appropriate and mitigate the impact, the negative impact of data sharing. This workshop, therefore, aims to bring together different stakeholders from the humanitarian organization working on innovation, as well as academia, the tech companies, civil society, data protection authorities, as well as 9 line ministries, to discuss the findings of the second working series of the Handbook on Data Protection in Humanitarian Action, as well as look into the challenges and facilitate a platform for future cooperation among different actors. By the end of this workshop, we hope that the stakeholders are able to better understand the implications on the use of new technologies and appreciate how the principle of do no harm can be applied in the digital age. I think it's a good reminder to always be conscious about the principle of do no harm in light of the fast, rapidly changing global environment. So it leaves me now to thank our ICRC partners, and that to say that we are very much looking forward to this joint workshop. I would also recognize the efforts that's done by the NTS HADR team, led by Al, Christopher, and Nantini and Lina, in joining our RCRC colleagues in organizing what I think is a very timely and useful workshop. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mali. Thank you for articulating so well the objectives of this workshop. Now it's time for our plenary session, and I would like to leave you in the hands of Dr. Alistair Cook, Senior Fellow and Coordinator for Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Relief Program at the RSIS, who will be the moderator for the plenary session. Thank you, and over to you, Al.
Thanks, Clara, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone. I'm happy to be the moderator for the plenary session, which we've titled Data Governance, Deconfliction of Data, Sifting Through the Noise. We have 3 speakers today, and they will speak for 10 minutes each. First, we'll hear from Mohammed Noor, who is the co-founder and managing director of the Rohingya Project. He's a Rohingya himself and has been engaged in a blockchain-based organization, the Rohingya Project, to bring financial inclusion and digital identity to stateless people. He's been actively involved in humanitarian work, and he has also published a book, Born to Struggle, The Child of Rohingya Refugees and His Journey and His Inspiring Journey, which was published in March 2019. Our second speaker is Associate Professor Hiroshi Miyashita, who's from the Faculty of Policy Studies at Chuo University in Japan. Prior to his current appointment, he served for the Office of Personal Information Protection in the Cabinet Office of Japan and has conducted research at Harvard Law School and Privacy Brussels Hub at the VUB, Free University of Brussels. He's published 6 books on privacy in Japanese, and he focuses on constitutional law and information law. Our third speaker is Suana Siddiq, who has over 15 years of experience in various roles in the oil and gas industry, so from the private sector, and her current position is head of portfolio for new energy, focusing on solar and wind energy. She also is an active participant in the humanitarian community and is currently a national executive board member for the Malaysian Red Crescent Society and was part of the team that helped set up Malaysian Humanitarian Coordination Action Hub, MATCH, an ecosystem platform that she will speak more about in her intervention. So with those introductions, may I hand over to Mohammed Noor for his intervention, please. Mohammed, over to you.
Good morning, good evening to all of you. I'm Mohammed Noor. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I really appreciate this great workshop organized by the ICRC and other hosts as well. Thank you to all the panelists and speakers. I will begin with something that is very, very personal, which is being a Rohingya. So we are the most persecuted people in Burma and across the world as well. So being deprived from what a normal citizen have or take for granted it's a project for us. So as he have introduced, I'm heading a couple of other initiatives. One of them is Rohingya Project, which is a social and financial inclusion, building a social and financial inclusion platform for the Rohingya people. So the discussion that I want to today shape is based on the individual empowerment rather than institutional empowerment. So today, the way we look at it, if we're talking about digital identity and governance and data and privacy and security as well. So we look at some of the important factor that any marginalized society faces. So Rohingya, being a stateless people, are being marginalized and been totally demonized from the mainstream, any kind of services back in Burma or any other parts of the world. So having said that, the identity so far, if we look at all our respective identity or data and so on, Rohingya has been totally deprived from any kind of things. So before we go into all this privacy and security, we must understand being a Rohingya or being a stateless or being a refugee, it is for a Rohingya, it's almost impossible to get even a birth certificate. It's impossible to get any kind of identity or any kind of opening a bank account or any those kind of things that is for anyone take it for granted. So back in Rohingya project, what we are trying to solve is that how can we empower individual as Rohingya to bring them social and financial inclusion to the Rohingya people using digital identity. So of course, as any other piece of technology, there is a good and bad associated with any kind of technology. So privacy and security is one of them. But most importantly, the digital identity that we're going to talk about in a breakout session is also is about how do we actually handle this digital identity, because this is a new space where today most of the whether physical identity or digital identity is being actually centralized within an organization, within an or a government, which is also prone to hacking, which is also prone to authoritarian dictatorship. In the case of Rohingya, this kind of data is actually used to demonize us and to basically use the kill switch to kill all the Rohingya back in 1982, if you understand the history of the Rohingya. So at the same time, what we are looking at is now the digital identity and the SOPs, and most importantly, so whether you need to have a formal identity or no identity at all. So what Rohingya project is trying to bring as the informal identity, rather than waiting from a genocidal Burmese government to give us an identity that they have revoked from Rohingya in 1982. So that is the whole framework. But at the same, the other points that I wanted to emphasize was the risk that associated with the personal data, that how we're going to handle, such as the iris scan, the biometrics, the fingerprint, the picture, image recognition and facial recognition and all those things. So these are the matters that can be addressed using SOP or any kind of a standards. But most importantly, what identity should be is an identity should belong to the identity holder himself, not an institution and not any kind of third party that actually prone to hacking and prone to any kind of misuse of data and so on. So with that, I wanted to finish with one sentence, which is using digital identity. The way I look at it, I'm a firm believer of a digital space, and especially on the blockchain. So it's empowering the individual rather than giving the right to a third party or an institution. So that is the moving forward. So we need to revolutionize identity using like a self-sovereign technique, or maybe using an permission-based kind of identity. Yes. So the other things we will talk about in our breakout session. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your intervention. I'd like to pass the floor now to Associate Professor Miyashita Hiroshi. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today. And yes, thank you for sharing my slides. So I'm going to share my observation in terms of privacy and data protection. And sometimes the people who do not study privacy and data protection sometimes misunderstand privacy and data protection may hinder a data-driven economy or cutting-edge technology. But this is completely wrong. Privacy is enabler for using this new technology and innovation. This is because by protecting your individual, you as a human, then the companies and the organization can use new technologies. If I may quote one sentence from Professor Christopher Kuna, who is my colleague at the Brussels Privacy Hub, in the context of a humanitarian action, data protection can literally be a matter of life and death. Next slide, please. Thank you. According to an Australian professor, Graham Greenleaf, there are 145 legislations in this world, on this planet. Unfortunately, there is no a single uniform treaty of privacy or data protection at this moment. But we have a UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the OECD and other European instruments, legal instruments. These are the piece of the privacy legislation across the world. But fortunately, we have a handbook on data protection in humanitarian action. Second edition was just published last year. Next slide, please. So I'm going to make an observation of paying attention, drawing your attention to the privacy risks in the data processing cycles. For instance, big data analytics. Sometimes people may misunderstand the concept between pseudonymization and anonymization. Pseudonymization is a concept part of eliminating the part of your personal data. For instance, eliminating my name, but other informations are used for data analytics purpose. This is a pseudonymous data. So pseudonymous data can easily be re-identified. So you should be, when you use the personal data as an anonymous data, you should completely eliminate the identifiable information in the data analytics. With regard to the biometrics, for instance, most challenging issue, underlying the challenging issue is facial recognitions. When it comes to facial recognition, so automatic these CCTVs using biometrics, your iris fingerprints, there is a privacy risks in terms of accuracy of identification. We have, for instance, Japanese global companies like Hitachi or NEC, which produces a large amount of CCTVs, including the automatic facial recognitions. They say 99% of accuracy guaranteed for these CCTVs, facial recognition CCTVs. However, there is a 1% of misidentification. When it comes to misidentification of a large amount of group, for instance, the population of Tokyo has 13 million. So 1% means 130,000 people may be misidentified. So when it comes to, when you use these kind of biometrics and these new technology, facial recognition, you should always be careful about the accuracy of identification. In addition to that, data retention period should be strictly limited. For instance, our experience in Japan of a Great East Japan earthquake, which occurred in March 2011, a decade ago, most of the police and the hospitals and the other NGOs used your tooth. Dental identification was extremely effective, for matching the people or missing people or seriously injured. However, there are some inaccurate of misidentification in these dental identification. So there should always be you should always be care about the accuracy of identification, and also these sensitive data must be strictly limited in terms of retaining the personal data. As for the artificial intelligence and machine learnings, there is a fashionable word, fashionable slogan such as human in the loop or human-centric approach in the artificial intelligence. But from an academic lawyer, I would say this is not a slogan. These kind of human-centric approach should be enforced by courts or other law enforcement sectors. In other words, in the European context, the GDPR explicitly provides a human intervention concept. So machines should not be automatically process the personal data. There should always be human intervention during the machine learning and the artificial intelligence technologies. As for the information sharing purposes among different international organizations, you should always be careful about the purpose limitation. When the data comes from one organization to another, the risk often happens by changing the different purposes. So the original purpose should be retained. And also in terms of data transfer, again, you should remember the countries, 145 countries implemented the privacy legislation, but there are dozens of countries which have no privacy legislations at all. So you should always prepare for reasonable security measures when you transfer those countries which have no privacy legislations. And NGOs and other humanitarian organizations often process personal data of minors, children. There is a strict rule of, for instance, European laws. When you process children's information, you should obtain parent consent before processing personal data. For instance, in the GDPR provides children under 16, you should obtain the parent consent before processing the children's information. Next slide, please. So let me conclude my remark by mentioning about the privacy due diligence. The United Nations has been created a world of human rights due diligence. So when it comes to processing personal data or sharing personal data, there are some basic privacy principles. I'm not going to share these of the basic principles in detail, but I just pointed out, I just would like to point out the only important aspect of privacy law. Some may misunderstand the differences between the private life and data protections. UN legal documents only mention the protection of private life. Private life means your private personal information, which should not be disclosed by you without your consent. But data protection has broader concept. When you use the open data, for instance, your face on the internet, this should be protected by data protection law. So data protection has a broader concept rather than the protection of private life. So even the open data on the internet should be regarded as personal data under the data protection law. And also the sensitivity, when it comes to sensitivity, there are some cultural differences from one continent to another. So for instance, financial information should be regarded as sensitive data under the Japanese law, but some of the European countries disclose the financial, your income, annual income, or annual payment of taxation. These financial sensitive information sometimes disclosed in Northern European countries. So you should remember some sensitivity. It's not a legal issue, it's a cultural issue. But you should also pay attention to this different attitude of sensitivity. And there are also some conflicts of law in terms of data protection, particularly those who are familiar with data protection law, there is a strict big tension in the Atlantic Ocean in terms of the different attitude of privacy law and from the US attitude and also the European attitude. So for instance, data transfer is strictly prohibited under the EU law, but the US has been pushing the free flow of information across the globe. And also in China and the Russian law, they have a data localization law. When they process their personal data, that data center should be located their own domestic jurisdiction. So these some different laws across the world. And two final things, privacy by design is a fashionable word as well. Those who are engineering and technologists, privacy should be embedded before inventing new technologies. And in your organization, you should appoint the privacy experts, privacy data protection officer. I understand International Red Cross has a excellent privacy officer, Massimo, who is based in Switzerland. He has an excellent knowledge on a privacy officer. So when you have some trouble in your organization, you can contact these experts before processing your personal data. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Professor. I will now yield the floor to Suana Siddique, who will speak for 10 minutes, please, and then maybe we have time for one round of questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, hi, Suhana from Malaysian Red Crescent. I'm also the coordinator for MATCH, and as you can see, it's the Malaysian Humanitarian Coordination and Action Hub. So before we start, I just wish to highlight that a lot of parties that we've worked today, either the government from the National Disaster Management, National Security, or NGOs, the company CSR program, public initiative, etc., they've done very well in responding to aid and crisis. But COVID was unprecedented. So the ideation of MATCH came about so that we could help in coordinating this humanitarian crisis, as it's a unique moment in our history. So the idea came from the use of data and digital technology to streamline aid and respond better to crisis. Next slide. So MATCH was an opportunity to fill up 3 gaps in the Malaysia humanitarian effort. Firstly, in terms of coordination and collaboration, where it enabled a country-level ecosystem platform that brings humanitarian actors into a single hub. People are a lot more coordinated, efforts could be a lot more efficient, and it became a national hub to efficiently channel aid to those in need. Today, the platform did not exist. Secondly, as the name mentioned, MATCH, right? We do a supply-demand matching where we had a database of supply in terms of aid, funding, and demand, where the use of aid are being deployed to accurately map fund to needs. So we match supply from either the government, the donor, the humanitarian aid organization to demand, where these are people that in need of the aid with data-driven insight. So such information then was very much fragmented in a lot of places. But thirdly, in terms of leveraging on technology in driving action, so we utilize technology and analytics to direct action, advocate issue, we develop predictive ability to increase capacity building. And the use of analytics then was not very common. But beyond all that, you see this big line of capacity building, because what we want to do beyond all of this is to provide a capacity building program to increase community resilience, but we want to be able to educate and build national capacity for all our humanitarian actors. Hence, next slide. This is where MATCH was formed. It was a PPP and a private sector-led initiative. We've got all of the body together for the first time. The government, our National Security Council, our National Disaster Unit, our Social Welfare Department. We've got the corporate partner in the likes of, you see here, PCG, but we've got this over 20 GLC disaster relief network cooperating with us. But we've also got the CSOs, currently co-chaired by Malaysian Red Crescent, but we've got the likes of all of the big and smaller NGOs together with us in this match. Next. We were very clear. So when we set it up, it was clear in terms of the vision that we want to do to create this resilient society. The objective in terms of having evidence-based, innovative humanitarian assistance, and our guiding principle largely adopted from the RCR, the Red Cross Red Crescent humanitarian principle and code of conduct. Next. And these were the areas that Match looked at. 5 clusters were being developed from health, well-being, food security, basic needs, livelihood, community engagement, and evidence-based advocacy, community resilience, and education. And what we wanted to do was not just coordinate this from a central level, but engage up to state and district level. So it will do response recovery, but not just during crisis, not just during COVID, but during humanitarian aid. We wanted it to be a sustainable approach, and there's a lot of knowledge and learning that is being shared across all of the NGO that we've engaged. Next. And all in all, we did well, right? So there were a lot of partnership and collaboration between the 3 parties, the government, the CSOs, and the corporation. But we saw a much more urgent need to streamline aid delivery when during COVID, everyone wanted to do everything. Hence why data and digital technology became the aid that is much needed. Next. And this is where a digital application called Kita Match, a digital platform that we created, was necessary to actually streamline aid delivery. And what we saw was that there was a lot of issues in terms of lack of transparency, because not everyone knows what everyone is doing. Government may be sending aid where the NGO is only sending aid to the same place. There were redundant effort. So there was a need to make sure that we are able to actually see all of this on a very much live streamlined effort. There was also a need to make sure that there are speed to action being delivered to the beneficiaries. We want to be able to have oversight and know what everyone is doing from cash and non-cash efforts. We see that because we cover all of a lot of the NGO CSO out there, not a lot of CSO are technologically enabled. Hence, how do we make sure that everyone get access to the same to a platform that would enable them to deliver aid faster? And there's lack of adherence to standard. A lot of public initiative came up, a lot of NGOs came up, but there's no single source of truth. So donors were confused in terms of which SCSO, NGO that they wanted to support. Hence why Kita Match and the whole ideation of Match was very necessary, because it's a donation aggregation platform that does matching demand and supply. So it was a single database that exchanged information between all the 3 parties. Government in terms of what they do, NGO, CSO in terms of where aid they deploy, and corporation as well in terms of how much funding that they wanted to do or what they have actually done. So it was real time. Everything was standardized, so everyone talked about the same language. It was a simple front-end tool accessible with all of the registered NGO that we vet through, and we make sure that they are competent. And we had analytics enabled insight that could be used by the NGO. Thanks. And this is where you see it was a win for all parties. What was great was for the government, they've got the big picture. It was a national level dashboard for oversight of humanitarian aid across all of the state. We were able to actually see an integrated view of all of the fund that was either received by the government, given by the government, as well as the private sector. And you could have insight on areas that require more focus, because when we map all of these needs, we were able to know which are the underfunded community or states which needed help. And it provided a lot of transparency. From a private sector, they appreciated the platform because it provided them a menu of the most updated funding need. They've got visibility over project that they wanted to fund, and they're able to actually connect with the local NGO that would actually fit the criteria that they have. And they're able to customize these based on geography, community, or the type of aid they wanted to do. So it was a great tool for them to actually use. From a social sector, Again, some of them do not have access to technology. So a simple platform that anyone can use, that is very simple, easily accessible, where they could actually raise up the fund need, they could actually update project progress, they would be able to actually have their own dashboard in terms of effort that they could do, was much needed. So in a way, it also identified overlap in terms of what everyone is doing and what spaces where underfunded or areas which will require assistance. And for the people of Malaysia, I mean, it's great because you could see just-in-time delivery where we could actually match all of this need, and to see the dashboard looking at how the government, the private sector, and the CSO, NGO are collaborating together creates a sense of fulfillment in terms of being the people of Malaysia. Next. Right. So just to give you a glimpse of how the platform looks like, so it's kitamatch.com.my. So you see this is the platform with the dashboard that shows an updated information of fund deployed, number of projects that we do, the CSOs, NGOs that we've onboarded. It's data aggregated, so you'll be able to actually see all of the projects. And for the NGO CSO, it just takes minutes for them to create projects. Next. And it's real time. We were able to actually look at the respective state and district and the community that we want to be able to assist. So this is a sample of dashboard that we produce, that we share with our partners. Next. And when we talk about the targeted recipient, what's great when we talk about removing redundancy, having transparency, is we track aid that was given based on what we call postcode level. So we would know exactly that an area in Malaysia, let's say in Gombak, right, where what kind of aid are given, which NGO are there, who are they helping, and all that. So in some of this area in Kelantan, this is an area in Tumpat, you see that there's a lot of NGO working at the same area. If we go look into detail, we could actually see what kind of support that they have actually given, how much have we given, and all that. And you see some of the area in, like, let's say Terengganu, there's not much assistance. So these are the kind of gap that we actually wanted to help using data and the ability of technology to actually point all this out. Next. So we've driven a lot of collaboration using the tool to look at how we could actually encourage partnership and collaboration between NGO. As you can see in case study 1 and 2, we've also looked at how the companies that we've worked with are using the tool to actually look at the targeted projects or this menu that they wanted to assist as well. Next. So in general, we see how Match has been very successful in driving this 3-party collaboration and partnership. And a lot of that are being driven by digital technology. As you democratize data, you let data being enabled to all of the NGO, CSO, government, you're able to actually streamline it better. Thank you.
We've heard 3 really interesting presentations on the use, 2 particular presentations on examples of the use of new technologies. One in terms of digital identities to empower vulnerable communities to offer an alternative platform to access services, which will be discussed further in the breakout group on digital identities. We've heard from Suana about the platform that is being developed in Malaysia for linking up community-based organizations with funders and government entities. And from Professor Hiroshi, we've heard about the challenges to privacy law and the use of data in posing a number of serious challenges for the humanitarian community, which will be discussed in the breakout room too. So thanks to the team at RSIS, thanks to ICRC in KL, and I hope you all have a good rest of the day wherever you are.